Welcome back to the Wretched Hive Cantina, where we talk alternative formats in Star Wars Unlimited. Today, we have a breaking piece of news straight from FFG regarding a brand new official format, and we're excited to talk about it. The article starts off, as a trading card game, Star Wars Unlimited naturally is host to multiple ways to play. In just the game's first year, we've had the limited formats of draft play and sealed play, the multiplayer format of Twin Suns, and, of course, the primary premier format for both the casual and competitive scene. Starting next year, we'll also have the Eternal format in which players can enjoy premier-style games with the entire card pool. But what if we told you that we had another format cooking up behind the scenes? Welcome to the Trilogy format, a brand new way to play Star Wars Unlimited. This is a head-to-head constructed format geared toward players who are eager to test their deck building prowess and matchup knowledge. We've got a good amount to share for this one, so let's dive right in and see what this new format has to offer. So not only do we get the Eternal format that they've been hinting at since day one, but we're getting this brand new Trilogy format that sounds like it's going to get official support. The foremost feature of the Trilogy format comes from its namesake. In order to play a Trilogy match, you must build 3 different decks. At their core, these decks have the same structure as the Premier format. Each deck consists of exactly 1 leader, exactly 1 base, and a minimum of 50 cards in the draw deck itself. However, where the Premier format restricts you to a maximum of 3 copies of any given card in your deck, the Trilogy format restricts you to a maximum of 3 copies of any given card across all 3 decks. That means that if you wanted to, say, include 3 copies of Open Fire in one of your decks, you couldn't include any copies of it in either of your other 2 decks. You could put 2 copies in one deck and 1 in another, or you could put a single copy in all 3 decks. Whatever combination you want, so long as you don't have more than 3 across the board. In a similar fashion, each deck has to have a different leader and a different base than the other 2. For example, you won't be able to build 3 different Sabine Wren Energy Conversion Lab decks, but you could build 3 different Aggression Command Heroism decks, if you really wanted to. Aside from that, and the maximum copies rule explained above, there's no restriction on which leaders, bases, or cards you include in your decks. Similar to the Eternal format, the game's entire card pool is legal in Trilogy, so go wild and build the 3 decks of your dreams. The big takeaway from this format should be that all of the suspended cards in Premier are back on the table. So Set 1 Boba Fett, Triple Dark Raid, Jango Fett, DJ, doesn't matter anymore. Put them in your decks. The article continues, once you have your 3 Trilogy decks built, it's time to take them to a match. When you sit down to play a Trilogy match, before any games take place, you and your opponent begin with a ban phase. In the ban phase, each player presents their 3 leader base pairings to their opponent, and their opponent secretly chooses one of those decks to ban from the match. The 2 of you then simultaneously reveal your choices, and the chosen decks are set aside and are unavailable for the rest of the match. After that, each player secretly chooses one of their 2 remaining decks to begin the match with. These are then also revealed simultaneously, and each player uses the chosen deck for Game 1. Whenever a game in the Trilogy format is finished, the winning deck for that game is set aside and can no longer be used for that match. Since this is a best-of-3 format, this means you will have to win with both of your unbanned decks in order to claim the match. If you lose the first game, you can choose which of your 2 available decks to use for the second game. But once you've won a game, you'll have to use the other deck until you win again. So not only does this format test your deck building skills, but it also tests your ability to pilot each of the decks you built, adding new strategic layers to every match. So it sounds like the game begins before you even shuffle up your cards. This whole ban phase mechanic is great because it's really going to test your knowledge and skills of what deck is going to be good against your opponents, or what deck your opponent has is going to be really hard for you to come back from. So choosing which deck to ban is going to be so important. It sounds like an awesome idea, and I really love this format right now. As with a lot of their articles, they went and got direct word from some of their developers and rule makers. So to provide a bit of insight into the development of the Trilogy format, they asked the design team's rules admiral Ryan Serrano to share some thoughts. Here's what he had to say. Trilogy was created to appeal to dedicated Star Wars Unlimited players who are looking to show off their deck building talents and matchup knowledge. In Trilogy, it's not enough to be an excellent pilot of just one deck, since that deck might be the one your opponent decides to ban. Instead of committing to one deck, players will need to be flexible and know how to play each of their decks into different matchups to claim victory. In addition, it allows seasoned players who might be interested in exploring new matchups the opportunity to ban their least favorite deck from their opponent, so they aren't forced to play the games against it over and over again. Trilogy is a format in which you never have to play against the Sabine leader with Energy Conversion Lab if you don't want to. As for the card limits, we implemented those primarily for three reasons. First, we wanted to create more interesting deck building decisions. If players want to include 3 copies of a particularly powerful card, they have to decide which deck needs those copies the most. Maybe it's better to run 1 in each deck, but maybe it's better to put them all in one deck. Second, we wanted to encourage deck variety. It's hard to build 3 decks around the Underworld trait, for instance, if you can't put the best Underworld cards in every single one of those decks. Finally, it was important to us that this format didn't demand additional collecting from players. We wanted this to be an exciting new way to play a match of Star Wars Unlimited, not a requirement that players go out and seek out more copies of hard-to-find cards that they already spent their time and effort collecting a playset of. This way, players can fully experience all the fun of the Trilogy format with just a normal playset of cards. It sounds like they put a lot of thought into the idea of not having to collect more cards to build your decks, which is incredible because I know just through these first few sets, I already have a mountain of cards to deal with. So I love that you can just pull the 3 cards that you already have in your play set, split it up amongst the decks however you want, and you don't have to go hunt down another 6 copies of some card that costs $50 a piece. In this part of the article, Ryan tries to take over my job and give you tips and tricks for building Trilogy decks. So this is what he had to offer. Try to build decks that have access to different card pools. You'll have a harder time building 3 competitive Vigilance, Aggression, Villainy decks, for example, when you aren't able to use more than 3 copies of any given card. Great advice. First thing I would do is probably build 3 totally different decks. I think if you build 3 decks that are the same card pool with the same kind of focus, what's going to happen is if your opponent has a way of beating those decks, you're just going to automatically lose too. So definitely want to try and split your card pool up. Think about what deck you're likely to ban when deciding what decks to build. You might bring 3 decks with the same weakness, planning to ban the deck that is favored into them. Or you might want to target a specific deck you expect many of your opponents to bring, bringing 3 decks with favorable matchups into that archetype and forcing your opponent to try and win with it. These are like really high level meta, like focus, this format could almost be more competitive than the standard Premiere format, because that little like nuance of being able to bring the counter is almost like what we do now with our sideboards and what cards to put in our sideboards based on what we think we're going to see and how to set it up. So right off the bat, I think there's a lot of interesting ways to approach which 3 decks to bring. Try new things. With 3 decks, you could play mind games with your opponent by bringing 2 decks they'll recognize and something out of left field. If they ban the familiar, you can surprise them with your more unexpected deck. If they ban the wild one out of fear of the unknown, you get to play 2 solid decks against them. That's a great idea. I'm probably thinking if you want to be ultra competitive, you're talking about bringing the 3 best decks. But for those guys who like to play off meta, which is exactly who I am, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring at least one of these left field decks and wait for someone to fall into my trap. I will love it. It'll be awesome. Most importantly, have fun. Part of the joy of Trilogy is you can create fun thematic synergies between your stable of decks. Will you be the player who brings 3 different Han Solo decks? Or maybe you'll bring Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and Emperor Palpatine for a throne room themed showdown. Mix and match to your heart's content. This is probably a way to make it like way more of a casual format, and I love that too. I think you could do stuff like one of your characters has to be from the original trilogy, one is from the prequels, and one is from the new trilogy. Or maybe like he was saying, 3 Han Solo decks. As we get more and more sets released, we're eventually going to have 3 Darth Vaders, 3 Lukes, 3, probably 3 Jar Jar Binks at some point in time, deep into the future. So definitely a cool way to do it if you're looking for more of a casual format. Just make sure that you talk to your group ahead of time, or your store, if they're setting something up, they make that known as part of the rules that you're doing something more geared towards theme, rather than just having a bunch of people bring super meta decks and you're there goofing around with stuff and you're just going to get waxed. So definitely an awesome way to play it casually, but it also sounds like it can be a super competitive way to play too. So great stuff all around. They save the best for last though. In their article, they say, Trilogy isn't the only new format that the designers have been working on. They're already pursuing ideas for even more ways to play Star Wars Unlimited, including formats that prioritize more casual players. You'll have to wait a while before we have any additional information to share on those, but for now, just know that there's a lot to look forward to for this game in the future. Definitely excited to see new formats. I know there's been a lot brewing in the community, and I'm hoping that some of those formats make it to an official FFG style format, and we see support at major events in the future. Thank you for sitting down at the Wretched Hive Cantina today and listening to this exciting news story about the new Trilogy format. If you want to continue to get the latest news on alternative formats in Star Wars Unlimited, subscribe to the channel and keep an eye out for all of our upcoming videos.